sent you. In spite of the fact that you are so broken. But I can fix you. Of course you die in the process. But I think you, of all people, deserve it.
So something most gamers probably don't know about Dark Sector is that it was the first next-gen game to ever be developed. Around late 2000 to early 2001, Digital Extremes had already begun construction on their custom tech, then known as Sector Engine, planned as a graphics engine to be developed entirely in-house. This was done without giving a thought to either the Xbox or the PS2, and Digital Extremes focused their attention on the horizon, creating a graphics engine that would only be able to run on the next generation of consoles, our current generation today. 8 years later, we finally get to see what Digital Extremes and D3 have created for us. Originally planned as a sci-fi themed action game with a futuristic setting, Dark Sector underwent a drastic policy switch around summer 2006, which turned the game into a down and dirty third-person shooter set in the dystopian ruins of a euthanized former Soviet bloc country. This fictional country, Lazria, has been plagued for 20 years by an epidemic of the equally fictional technocyte virus, which transforms everything it touches into metal-skinned mutants. All of this talk of viruses and infections might bring to mind another game by Digital Extremes called Pariah, which also involved an infection of similar ferociousness. This similarity might also scare gamers who played Pariah, and for good reason, because the story in Pariah literally made no sense, and offered very, very little explanation for what was going on and why.
Don't think of this as an execution, Jack. It's more like the extinction of a competing strain.
Thankfully, the story in Dark Sector doesn't sink as low, but you've almost certainly played games with more entertaining storytelling.
Идите на место. Обратно на патруль.
You take control of Hayden Tenno, a Black Ops assassin and a tortured soul plagued by psychological trauma garnered from the countless kills he's carried out in his career. Accepting one last mission before his promised retirement, Hayden is sent to Lazria to track down and eliminate a rogue CIA asset named Mesner in order to stop him from trading the technocyte as a bioweapon on the black market. Unfortunately, our hero gets infected himself, which complicates things to say the very least.
Been infected. The shot you gave me, it's not working!
I'm putting the hazmat team together right now. I want you to carry on.
Again, this isn't Half-Life 2, and this isn't Bioshock. It's not nearly as deep or interesting a narrative. I wouldn't go so far as to call the story forgettable, but it does have a distinct lack of memorable moments, and relies heavily on backstory, which means you won't often get a clear explanation for every question or every plotline that's raised.
Shit!
You'll get short cutscenes that set up the heavy action every now and then, but the majority of the game you'll be kicking ass. This can be considered a good thing, since the ass-kickery is the front-running feature of the game. This also means it got a lot of attention. The game's truest form of innovation comes in the shape of the bladed frisbee boomerang from HAL, more commonly called the glaive. Hayden's infection allows him to grow the glaive out of his infected arm at any time to destroy the opposition in a number of ways. The power throw allows you to dismember enemies in a single hit, while the charge ability lets you harness elements like fire, ice, and electricity. You'll also get the aftertouch ability, which allows you to control the flight of the glaive in slow motion. As the infection spreads, Hayden gains new powers like a deflector shield and the shifting ability that lets you turn invisible for a short time. You'll need almost every one of these powers to solve puzzles and progress through levels, as well as defeat boss monsters, and it's absolutely essential to integrate all of these powers into combat if you want a prayer of surviving the game's hardest setting. The glaive and its powers definitely add something new to the genre, and they'll probably be what's most memorable about Dark Sector, as well as what makes it stand out from other games. While the glaive is the core gameplay here, there are also guns to shoot, and headshots get the job done just as well as decapitation. Enemy weapons will self-destruct after about 30 seconds, so you'll need to collect money to buy your own at black market locations. You can buy and upgrade new weapons on the black market, as well as switch your loadout. Since you're only allowed to carry one rifle and one pistol at any given time, both of which can only be swapped at black market locations, you'll have to choose wisely depending on what area you're about to enter, and there's a fair bit of trial and error involved the first time through.
Ah, you have a good eye.
If you aren't entirely satisfied with your chosen arsenal, most of the game seems to be designed so that the glaive can handle just about anything it throws at you. If you manage to stun an enemy, there's also the option to perform a brutal set of finisher moves that are both super gory and even a little sickening, but undeniably badass. While the enemies aren't very smart, they're varied enough to offer a decent set of challenges to tackle. Boss fights are both cinematic and intense, as you'll probably find, since most of them take a fair amount of thinking and strategy to defeat, which is a rare thing nowadays and definitely adds another layer of depth to the gameplay. You'll also be able to take control of the mechanized Jackal tank from time to time, which adds a tad of variation to the gameplay, but the overall gameplay, which consists mainly of gun-glaive combat, can get a little repetitious. The limited multiplayer component is hardly worth mentioning, but it is there. It's possible that Digital Extremes had planned to make Dark Sector with the absence of a competitive multiplayer option, and it honestly might have turned out better had they done so. The few maps and 2 modes available offer some extra content next to the 10-hour single-player campaign, but it brings to mind similar half-assed multiplayer designs like Condemned 2 and The Darkness. It's a hard thing to say that Dark Sector is not a must-play, especially since it's been such a long wait for this game to get finished. While there are some shining and even innovative qualities here, the handful of technical issues, repetition, and lack of wow moments in the overall progression hurt it just enough to demote the game down to the worth playing bracket. Dark Sector feels like the beginning of something that could have been really amazing, and maybe if they release a well-polished sequel, it will be. As is, the game meets average expectations and is not by any means a bad game. You could probably live without ever playing it, but with this much cinematic death and gore right at your infected fingertips, you'll almost certainly enjoy yourself if you decide to take a journey through the Dark Sector.
You should have cut and run when you had the chance. You can't stop this, even if you think it is the right thing to do.
Let's see what you got. This wasn't supposed to happen.